Jake Reeves had always found more satisfaction in working with his hands than in navigating the complex social dynamics that seemed to complicate every other aspect of military life, which was why his assignment as diplomatic armorer for the Cathurian Peace Summit felt like winning the lottery. The job required him to maintain and repair ceremonial weapons and armor for delegates from multiple species, work that allowed him to indulge his passion for metallurgy and craftsmanship, while avoiding the political maneuvering that made most diplomatic events exercises in barely controlled hostility. Ceremonial Cathurian Honor Guard armor, circa 2387, showing impact damage consistent with deliberate sabotage. He muttered to himself, examining the intricate plates that had been brought to his workshop by a very unhappy-looking alien warrior, probably plasma scoring from close-range energy weapons. The armor was a masterpiece of both engineering and artistry, with each plate bearing engraved patterns that seemed to tell a story through symbols and designs that Jake's universal translator couldn't interpret, but that clearly represented something important to its owner. Commander Lyra Velthane stood nearby, watching him work with the kind of focused attention that suggested either professional interest or barely controlled anxiety. "The damage appears to be intentional," Jake said, running his fingers along scoring patterns that showed too much precision to be accidental. Someone with knowledge of Cathurian armor construction targeted specific structural points. "Yes," Lyra replied, her elongated ears flickering with bioluminescent patterns that Jake's translator was identifying as anger mixed with concern. "It happened during what was supposed to be routine maintenance by our own engineering staff. Inside job. Almost certainly. The question is whether this represents personal animosity or political sabotage designed to compromise my effectiveness during the peace negotiations." Jake began the repair process with the methodical care he brought to all fine craftsmanship, noting details about the armor's construction that revealed sophisticated understanding of both metallurgy and biomechanics. Each plate was perfectly balanced and articulated, designed to provide protection without restricting movement, while the engraved patterns served as both decoration and functional elements that seemed to interface with some kind of technological system. "The engravings are fascinating," he said, carefully cleaning centuries of accumulated wear from the intricate designs. "They're not just decorative, they're actually functional components of some kind of integrated system." "The patterns record achievement, lineage, and honor," Lyra explained, though her ear lights were shifting to patterns that looked increasingly concerned as Jake continued his work. "Each design represents a milestone in the wearer's life and service." Jake found himself becoming absorbed in the work, treating each plate with the kind of reverent attention he normally reserved for historical artifacts or masterwork weapons. The cleaning process revealed details that had been obscured by time and use, bringing out the full beauty of the craftsmanship, while ensuring that the repairs would be invisible to casual observation. "This is remarkable work," he said, polishing the last plate to a mirror finish that revealed patterns within patterns, stories told in metal that spoke of battles won, lives saved, and honors earned. Whoever created this understood that armor isn't just protection, it's a statement of identity and purpose. "Jake," Lyra said, and her voice carried a note of something that might have been panic, "do you know what you've just done?" "I cleaned and repaired your ceremonial armor," Jake replied, looking up from his work to see that Lyra was staring at him with an expression that combined shock, amazement, and what looked like growing alarm. "Is there a problem with the quality of the work?" "The quality isn't the problem," Lyra said slowly, her ear lights cycling through patterns that Jake's translator was struggling to interpret, but that definitely indicated extreme emotional intensity. "The problem is that you've just performed the Bon Polish." "The what now?" "A sacred ritual that constitutes a formal consort pledge according to Cathurian law. Only family members or chosen bondmates are permitted to clean ceremonial armor, because the process creates legal and spiritual connections between the armor's owner and the person who performs the maintenance. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach as he realized that his professional attention to detail had apparently just gotten him engaged to an alien military commander during the most important diplomatic summit in recent history. "When you say formal consort pledge," he said carefully, "are we talking about a symbolic gesture, or are there actual legal implications?" "We're talking about provisional bondmate status with shared command authority, access to classified military information, and responsibility for each other's honor and welfare according to laws that predate first contact with your species by several centuries." Jake looked at the perfectly polished armor, then at Lyra, whose ear lights were now displaying patterns that seemed to indicate she was rapidly calculating the political implications of their situation. "Commander Velthane," he said, "I think we may have accidentally created a diplomatic incident." "Jake," Lyra replied, her ear lights shifting to patterns that definitely indicated concern mixed with something that might have been affection, "I think we may have accidentally solved several diplomatic problems while creating entirely new ones." "Is that good or bad?" "That," Lyra said, activating her communication systems to check for incoming messages, "depends on how the various political factions involved in these peace negotiations decide to exploit or eliminate what we've just done." Jake's portable scanner chose that moment to start detecting energy signatures that suggested they were being monitored by multiple surveillance systems, confirming that their conversation had attracted attention from people with access to sophisticated equipment. "So," he said, "what exactly happens next when you accidentally become engaged to someone from another species during a peace summit?" "We find out whether the bond polish was observed by people who want to help us or people who want to kill us," Lyra replied grimly. "And we make some very difficult decisions about whether to affirm a relationship that could change the outcome of these negotiations, or repudiate it, and pretend that ancient Cathurian bonding rituals don't actually work on humans." The first sign that their accidental engagement had attracted unwanted attention came when Jake's workshop access codes were suddenly upgraded to include classified military databases and command protocols that definitely weren't part of his original security clearance. The second sign was when Lyra's communication system started receiving congratulatory messages from Cathurian officials who somehow already knew about the bond polish, despite the fact that they'd been alone in the workshop when it happened. "We're being monitored," Lyra said, checking her scanner readings while Jake tried to understand why his terminal was suddenly offering him access to Cathurian military deployment schedules. Multiple surveillance systems, both human and Cathurian, with sophisticated enough equipment to detect the biochemical changes that accompany provisional bonding. "Biochemical changes?" Jake asked, noting that his own biometric readings were showing unusual patterns that his medical scanner couldn't quite interpret. "The bond polish creates temporary physiological synchronization between partners. Shared stress responses, coordinated biorhythms, and enhanced trust markers that allow bonded pairs to work together with perfect cooperation." Lyra's ear lights shifted to patterns that indicated she was accessing deep cultural knowledge. It was designed to ensure that warriors and their support teams could function as unified tactical units. And that's what's triggering all these surveillance alerts. That, and the fact that provisional bonding grants shared access to command authorities and classified information that various political factions would very much like to control or eliminate. Jake's workshop terminal activated with incoming messages from sources ranging from human diplomatic officials to what appeared to be Cathurian palace administrators, all requesting immediate meetings to discuss the implications of recent developments. "Popular guy, suddenly," he observed, noting that some of the meeting requests came with veiled threats while others included offers of significant financial compensation for his cooperation with unspecified objectives. The bond has political value, Lyra explained, studying the messages with the kind of tactical assessment that suggested her military training included intelligence analysis. Depending on how it's handled, our relationship could either strengthen the peace negotiations or provide justification for those who want to see them fail. Hell, successful interspecies bonding proves that cooperation between our peoples is not only possible but beneficial. Failed or repudiated bonding provides evidence that cultural differences are insurmountable. Lyra activated additional displays that showed political position papers and media analysis already being generated around their situation. Both sides have factions that prefer conflict to cooperation because they profit from ongoing tensions. Jake accessed his new security clearances, discovering that the provisional bond had granted him access to financial records and communication logs that painted a disturbing picture of the forces working behind the scenes at the Peace Summit. These audit trails show payments to defense contractors from both our governments, he said, highlighting transactions that showed the same corporations working for supposedly hostile administrations. The same companies that profit from ongoing conflict have been consulting on security arrangements for the peace negotiations, including, Lyra added, accessing her own enhanced information systems, the security consultants who arranged for my armor to be sabotaged in a way that would require repair by human technicians. You're saying that our accidental bonding was engineered by people who wanted to create exactly this kind of political complication. I'm saying that my armor was damaged in a way that would require the services of the one human armorer, whose personality profile suggested he might accidentally trigger a bonding ritual. Lyra's ear lights shifted to patterns that indicated grim realization. Your assignment to this summit wasn't random. You were specifically chosen because your expertise and approach to craftsmanship made you the most likely candidate to perform the bond polish without understanding its implications. Jake felt anger building as he realized the scope of the manipulation they'd been subjected to. Someone wanted to create a diplomatic incident that could be exploited to either strengthen or undermine the peace process, depending on how it played out. And now, we have to decide whether to play along with their manipulation or find a way to turn the situation to our advantage. Lyra's communication system activated with an urgent priority message from her commanding officer, requesting immediate consultation about her change in diplomatic status and the security implications of her bond with a human technician. They're not wasting time, Jake observed, noting that his own messages included what appeared to be direct orders from human military command to report for debriefing about his unauthorized involvement in alien political processes. The question is whether they're trying to help us navigate the situation or eliminate the complications we represent, Lyra said, studying the message traffic patterns with growing concern. Jake, I need to know. Are you willing to affirm the bond and accept the political consequences, or do you want to repudiate it and try to return to your normal life? What would affirming the bond involve? A public ceremony that would make our partnership permanent and irrevocable, granting us joint access to command authorities and classified information, while making us permanent targets for anyone who profits from interspecies tension. And repudiating it would dissolve the provisional bond, restore our original security clearances, and allow the people who manipulated us to continue profiting from conflicts they help create and maintain. Jake looked at the evidence of corruption and manipulation surrounding them, then at Lyra, whose ear lights were displaying patterns he was beginning to recognize as hope mixed with concern for his welfare. Lyra, he said, when I cleaned your armor, I was thinking about honoring the craftsmanship and the achievements it represents. If affirming our bond means we can expose the people who are manipulating peace negotiations for profit, then I think honoring that commitment is exactly what I signed up for. Even if it means permanent exile from normal human society and becoming a target for elimination by people with significant resources and military connections. Especially then, Jake replied, activating emergency protocols that would secure his workshop against surveillance while they planned their next moves. Because I'd rather be targeted for doing the right thing than ignored for enabling the wrong thing. Lyra's earlights exploded in patterns that definitely indicated relief mixed with affection and determination. "Jake Reeves," she said, "I think accidentally bonding with you might be the best thing that's happened to these peace negotiations." The first assassination attempt came disguised as a routine security inspection, while Jake and Lyra were reviewing the classified information their provisional bond had unlocked. Armed figures wearing human military uniforms entered Jake's workshop with authorization codes that appeared legitimate, but their weapons were configured for elimination rather than detention, and their approach suggested they had orders to leave no witnesses. "These aren't standard diplomatic security personnel," Lyra observed, her military training allowing her to recognize the tactical signatures of an elimination team. "They're moving with coordination that suggests special operations training and equipment designed to disable alien physiology." "Great," Jake said, securing his workshop's defensive systems while trying to process the fact that people were apparently willing to kill him for accidentally cleaning someone's armor. "Any idea who sent them?" "Could be human hardliners who want to prevent interspecies cooperation. Kithurian palace rivals who see our bond as a threat to existing power structures, or the defense contractors who profit from ongoing tension between our species." Lyra activated her armor's combat systems, transforming her ceremonial gear into fully functional battlefield equipment. "At this point, we have enough enemies that the specific motivation is less important than surviving the next few minutes." Through their enhanced information access, they had discovered that the corruption surrounding the peace summit went far beyond simple war profiteering. The same networks that arranged conflicts to generate military contracts had also been manipulating refugee crises, arms trading, and territorial disputes across multiple star systems, creating a vast criminal enterprise that depended on preventing lasting peace between species. The audit trails show financial connections between defense contractors, political officials, and what appears to be organized crime syndicates, Jake reported while coordinating their workshop security systems with Lyra's armor technology. "We're not just dealing with corrupt officials. We're dealing with a systematic conspiracy that treats interspecies conflict as a profit center, which explains why they're willing to eliminate witnesses rather than risk exposure," Lyra said, engaging the first wave of attackers with weapons systems that had been integrated into her ceremonial armor. "Our provisional bond gives us access to information that could destroy their entire operation." The battle was brief but intense, complicated by the need to protect the evidence they'd gathered while fighting off opponents who had access to military-grade equipment and inside knowledge of the summit's security arrangements. Through their biochemical synchronization, Jake and Lyra coordinated their responses with precision that would have been impossible for separate individuals, combining his technical expertise with her combat training to create defenses the attackers hadn't anticipated. "They're withdrawing," Jake observed as the elimination team retreated under orders from superiors, who had apparently decided that a failed assassination attempt was worse than letting them live temporarily. "But this was just the first attempt, and it confirms that our bond represents a genuine threat to powerful interests," Lyra added, checking her armor systems while reviewing intelligence reports that showed multiple factions moving against them. "We have until dawn to decide whether to affirm the bond publicly or dissolve it and pretend this never happened. What happens if we affirm it? We gain permanent access to the command authorities and audit systems we need to expose the entire conspiracy. but we also become permanent targets for elimination by everyone involved in the operation. Lyra's earlights shifted to patterns that indicated she was weighing complex political calculations. More importantly, we become living proof that interspecies cooperation works, which threatens the foundational assumptions that allow conflict profiteers to operate. And if we dissolve the bond, the provisional access expires, the evidence becomes legally inadmissible in most jurisdictions, and the people responsible for manipulating peace negotiations continue operating while we return to our original assignments with target marks on our backs. Jake studied the evidence they'd gathered, noting patterns that showed the conspiracy extended far beyond the current peace summit to include systematic manipulation of diplomatic processes throughout the galaxy. Lyra, he said, if we affirm this bond, are we talking about a political partnership or something more personal? The Cathurian bonding process doesn't distinguish between political and personal partnerships, she replied, her earlights flickering with patterns that looked like vulnerability mixed with hope. Affirming the bond would create permanent psychological and legal connections that make us partners in every sense of the word. Meaning that we would share not just command authority and classified information, but also emotional states, tactical thinking, and long-term life goals. Lyra looked at him directly, her expression honest about both the benefits and costs of what she was describing. I would know your thoughts and motivations, and you would know mine, without the barriers that normally separate individuals. Jake felt the weight of the decision they were facing, not just whether to risk their lives exposing corruption, but whether to permanently bind their futures to someone they'd known for less than 24 hours. Before we make this decision, he said, I need to know, do you actually want this bond, or are you just choosing the least terrible option available to us? Lyra's earlights shifted to patterns that indicated deep thought mixed with something that might have been affection. Jake, when you cleaned my armor, you treated it with the kind of respect and attention that most people reserve for sacred objects. You understood instinctively that it represented something important, even though you didn't know what that was. And that matters because the bond polish isn't just about cleaning armor. It's about demonstrating that you care enough about someone's achievements and identity to preserve them properly. Her earlights shifted to patterns that definitely indicated affection. You performed a sacred ritual without knowing it was sacred, which means your actions reflected genuine character rather than political calculation. So you're saying that accidentally bonding with someone who appreciates fine craftsmanship is better than deliberately bonding with someone for political advantage. I'm saying that I've found a human partner who shares my values about honor, service, and protecting people who can't protect themselves, Lyra replied. The fact that our partnership could also expose massive corruption and save thousands of lives just makes it perfect. Jake looked at the evidence surrounding them, then at Lyra, whose accidental bonding with him had revealed both the conspiracy they were fighting and the possibility of a relationship that transcended species boundaries. You know what, he said, activating the communication systems that would allow them to broadcast their decision to the entire summit. I think affirming this bond might be the most important work I've ever done. The formal bond affirmation ceremony took place at dawn in the summit's main assembly hall, broadcast live to monitoring stations throughout both human and Cathurian space, as Jake and Lyra publicly accepted the permanent partnership that would either expose the largest corruption scandal in interspecies history or make them the most wanted fugitives in the galaxy. The ceremony combined human legal procedures with Cathurian spiritual traditions, creating a partnership that transcended species boundaries while granting them unprecedented authority to investigate crimes that spanned multiple governments. Jake Reeves of Terra, he said, his voice carrying across the hall to delegates who had gathered to witness what many considered either a historic breakthrough or a diplomatic disaster, Do affirm the bond polish and accept permanent partnership with Lyra Velthane in service of truth, justice, and the protection of innocent beings. I, Lyra Velthane of Kithuros, she replied, her ear lights blazing with patterns that indicated absolute commitment. Do affirm the bond and accept permanent partnership with Jake Reeves in the pursuit of honor and the exposure of those who profit from suffering. The moment their hands joined in the ceremonial clasp, Jake felt his consciousness expand in ways that would have been terrifying if he hadn't been prepared for the experience. Suddenly, he could access not just Lyra's thoughts and memories, but her understanding of Kithurian military procedures, political networks, and the cultural values that made their partnership more than just a legal arrangement. At the same time, Lyra gained access to his technical knowledge, his perspective on human engineering and craftsmanship, and his deep commitment to preserving and protecting things of value. The bond is witnessed and affirmed, announced the summit's chief administrator, whose presence suggested that the ceremony carried significant political weight despite the unusual circumstances. Jake Reeves and Lyra Velthane now possess joint authority to investigate crimes affecting both our species. Through their completed mental connection, they accessed the full database of evidence that their bond had unlocked, experiencing not just raw data, but the emotional impact of the conspiracy's consequences. They felt the desperation of diplomats whose peace efforts had been sabotaged, the anger of military personnel whose operations had been manipulated for profit, and the suffering of civilians caught in conflicts designed to generate contractor revenue. Broadcasting evidence now, Jake announced, using their combined authority to override security restrictions and transmit their findings to every monitoring station within communication range. Financial records, communication logs, and operational plans for systematic manipulation of interspecies relations. Arrest warrants are being issued simultaneously across 17 star systems, Lyra added, her access to Kithurian command networks allowing her to coordinate law enforcement responses in real time. The conspiracy extends to 43 individuals in positions of governmental authority and military command. The evidence they broadcast was comprehensive, undeniable, and immediately actionable, triggering responses from law enforcement agencies that had been waiting for exactly this kind of proof to move against suspects they'd been monitoring for years. 1 year later, Jake and Lyra stood in their joint workshop on Nexus Station, a facility that combined human engineering capabilities with Kithurian military technology to serve as headquarters for their independent investigation service. Their success in exposing the Peace Summit conspiracy had led to requests for assistance from dozens of worlds dealing with similar corruption problems. The final prosecution statistics are impressive, Jake reported, reviewing data that showed the scope of their success. 43 convictions, 17 government agencies reorganized with new oversight protocols, and corruption networks dismantled across multiple star systems. The personal statistics are even better, Lyra added, her ear lights flickering with patterns that indicated deep satisfaction with their work and their relationship. 1 successful interspecies marriage, 0 regrets about accidentally bonding with someone who appreciates fine craftsmanship. Through their permanent mental connection, Jake felt Lyra's contentment at finding a human partner who understood that service meant more than just following orders, while Lyra experienced his satisfaction at discovering that his technical skills could serve causes larger than simple maintenance and repair. Any complaints about the permanent psychological bonding? Jake asked, though their shared consciousness made his feelings on the subject obvious. About sharing my life with someone who was willing to risk everything to expose corruption and protect innocent people. Lyra's ear lights shifted to patterns that indicated deep affection mixed with amusement. Not even close. They reviewed their current case files, noting that their exposure of the original conspiracy had revealed connections to similar operations throughout the galaxy, creating a steady stream of investigation requests from governments and advocacy organizations that had finally decided to take corruption seriously. The Altair colony situation, Lyra said, highlighting a file that contained reports of suspicious contract awards affecting refugee assistance programs. Defense contractors, manipulated bidding processes, and supply failures that suggest systematic exploitation. Road trip to expose more corruption. Jake asked, grinning at the prospect of applying their unique combination of technical analysis and military authority to another conspiracy that needed dismantling. Road trip to expose more corruption, Lyra confirmed. Though this time, let's try to investigate without accidentally performing any sacred rituals that create permanent life partnerships. Where's the fun in that? Jake asked, and through their mental connection, he felt Lyra's agreement that some accidents were worth embracing when they led to partnerships that could change the galaxy. As they prepared for their next mission, Jake reflected on how completely his life had been transformed by absent-mindedly cleaning someone's armor with the kind of care and attention he brought to all fine craftsmanship. He had lost his quiet workshop job, but gained something infinitely more valuable, a partnership that had exposed massive corruption, prevented countless conflicts, and proven that the most important bonds could form between people who shared values even when they didn't share species. "You know," he said as they walked toward the spaceport where their ship waited, "when I cleaned your armor, I was just thinking about honoring the craftsmanship and the achievements it represented." "And when I watched you work," Lyra replied, her ear lights shifting to patterns that indicated deep happiness mixed with anticipation of future adventures, "I was thinking about how rare it is to find someone who understands that taking care of important things is itself a form of service." Through their mental link, they shared the quiet satisfaction of knowing that their accidental engagement had become something real and meaningful, a partnership that made both of them more effective at serving the causes they'd chosen independently before finding each other. The universe, it turned out, had a sense of humor about matchmaking, but it also had a way of bringing together people who needed each other to accomplish things neither could achieve alone. Sometimes the most important relationships began with simple acts of craftsmanship performed with genuine care, and sometimes the greatest victories came from choosing to honor commitments that seemed impossible when first made. Their marriage had started with an accident, but it had become proof that the right partnership could turn individual expertise into systematic change, one carefully cleaned piece of armor at a time.